Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished and successful entrepreneur from Melbourne, Australia, Mr. Marc Seitz. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Mark is
Welcome.
the Mark is the founder of Papermark, and he has always been drawn to solving complex problems through technology. So, Mark, before we come to Papermark, a few questions for you. Tell me a little bit about your own journey and how did your academic background in physics and economics shape your mindset as a builder and problem solver?
Yeah, happy to elaborate a little bit on my background. So, um, physics always interested me because of, just the natural laws of physics
Hmm.
and how it shapes our physical world. Software, of course, is very different because it shapes our digital world. But what I found interesting in physics were really these hard challenges about solving the unknowns
Hmm.
and discovering something, maybe like a 0.1% of something new that could change something, the world completely. And the problem with physics is that the gratification, so the success moments come really, really long
Hmm.
in the future. So it's not something you run an experiment and you instantly get the results. It typically takes years of research, of theory, of experimenting, and the timeline is just extremely long in order to
Hmm.
get a successful moment. And
Right.
with software, it was instant. You change a line of code, you rerun the system, and you see the result on your page.
Hmm.
There is no waiting. There is this instant success moment. And
Hmm.
that really drew me to the software world. Other than that, they're very similar. You're still solving very difficult problems, logically intense. And then, of course, the economics aspect. I was always interested in how can we increase the GDP of the internet, of the world, and how do complex deal structures fit together.
Hmm.
And solving that in software was a perfect combination of the two of them.
Hmm. Well said. When did you first realize that document sharing and the lack of transparent, secure tooling was a problem worth tackling at scale?
Yeah, Papermark is not my first company, so I had previously companies that I was fundraising for and sharing very sensitive documents, either with
Hmm.
investors
Hmm.
or potential partners for an acquisition. So it was really important for me to make sure that I have a full insight into what goes on when I share my documents, that they're not getting leaked, that they're not being abused, and especially also that I have that insight that who is actually viewing them,
Hmm.
and so it I think that occurred to me already like along like my first couple of startups a couple of years ago, um, but it really came to fruition with like Papermark, um, just because I felt like I was in a point in time where I had experienced all these pain points from fundraising myself
Hmm.
to structuring deals, investing in others. And I've seen a lot of data rooms, I've seen a lot of document sharing platforms to have a good insight into what could make a great product and
Hmm.
what's missing in the space.
Amazing. What has surprised you the most about founding and scaling Papermark that you didn't expect when you first started?
Um, I think the amount of PDFs I would have to work with, and the issues I would find in PDFs.
Hmm.
It's a great file format, and it might be a bit controversial. Of course, there's Microsoft Office Suite and Google Docs,
Yeah.
but in the end, PDFs is an amazing standard that Adobe created a really long time ago.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that they didn't monetize that. Otherwise, I don't know where we would be today.
Hmm.
However, it's a flawed format, so there's a lot of issues with it. And working with PDFs, I didn't expect I would have to do so much work with it.
Hmm. Amazing. Let's come to Papermark. How would you describe the mission of Papermark in one sentence, especially in the context of document sharing and data rooms?
Yeah. So we're Papermark is building the modern infrastructure for how businesses, small and large, share sensitive documents.
Hmm.
And we do this open source, analytics first, and really designed for modern deal workflows.
Okay. And what specific pain points in existing document sharing tools did you set out to solve when you were building Papermark?
Yeah, there were a couple. The most important are definitely when you look at the different industries,
Hmm.
you can see exactly where a product like Papermark would come in. So, for example, in the M&A industry, it's really important that you have a clear audit log, a source of truth
Hmm.
of who's viewing documents and who's accessing the data room, who's downloading something, who's uploading
Hmm.
files. You need to have a full transparency, especially because in M&A transactions,
Yeah.
these are multi-billion valuations that change hands, and it's really important to get these um, details legally correct. The other is, of course, sending a document as an attachment
Hmm.
still exists, but it shouldn't because
Hmm.
you have no idea what happens to the document after you send it. You don't know whether someone views it. You're basically sending it blind.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to give that control back to the original sender, whether it's
Hmm.
a founder, a sales team, or someone just sharing a document with a third party, that they have
Right.
that full control back to them.
Hmm.
And then lastly, I mean, we're not the first data room infrastructure, of course. There's others before us that started in the early 2000s. However, software and the user experience at this time looked very different. The business models looked very different. So besides control and audit logs and analytics,
Hmm.
we wanted to really elevate the user experience, both for the admins and for the
Hmm.
developers, right? Bring in new workflows
Right.
that are up to like the 2026 standards, and are not from the late 90s. So
Hmm.
that's there's a lot of things that have changed, whether it's AI, whether it's the type of analytics you can now receive from like someone viewing a document, whether that's over email or the browser or an
Hmm.
application.
Hmm.
And um, also, frankly, the security. In security, it's constantly evolving, right? There's constantly cat and mouse between adversarial and kind of like the white hat hackers.
Hmm.
And so the security aspect of how to protect, encrypt documents and data
Hmm.
rooms has also evolved a lot, and we want to bring in these like modern
Hmm.
workflows into the
Hmm.
experience.
Hmm. Great response. Papermark offers page by page analytics.
Yeah.
How does this change the way teams understand and act on engagement?
Yeah, I think that's at the heart of Papermark.
Hmm.
Just giving the insights to the teams that are sharing documents with third parties.
Right.
It's really knowing the difference whether someone has, opened just an email that you maybe send with an attachment versus knowing that they spent maybe 3 minutes on the pricing slide and skipped your team page entirely, right? For startups, fundraising, they can just produce better follow-ups to investors. For
Hmm.
sales teams, they know exactly what their proposals trigger in customers in the deals that they're sending.
Hmm.
And also for in the venture capital industry, it's also important, like which portfolio companies getting tractions with like the LPs. So what are LPs interested in the end?
Hmm.
Uh, and of course, the page by page analytics gives you a huge insight in
Yeah.
the mergers and acquisition deal transactions because
Hmm.
you can narrow down exactly that the lawyers of the buy side have actually looked at page 10 of document 5,
Hmm.
and you can prove that.
Hmm.
So this gives you legal recourse essentially, and provability.
Wow. Custom domains and branding are highlighted as a key feature. Can you talk about why design and brand experience matter in document sharing?
Yes. So we think that individuality and professionalism is kind of like the most important when you're engaging in a business deal. Nobody wants to see like kind of like a random website that you don't trust when you're engaging with a client. And so we made the conscious decision early on to kind of put branding and personalization like front and center in Papermark.
Hmm.
So whether you're raising a Series A round or you're running an M&A process, really every touch point is part of that story. So you
Hmm.
want to make sure that it looks on brand. And if your data room looks like a generic just file share, um, you kind of already falling behind because, custom domains means you can have like VDR or deals dot and then your company domain dot
Hmm.
com.
Hmm.
It's it feels small, but it's definitely a noticeable feature that both investors and the external partners that you're
Hmm.
sending it to notice, and it builds trust, and it also builds trust between the deal parties.
Hmm. Well said. What are the most common uses you see across startups, VC firms, and enterprises?
Yeah, happy to elaborate a little bit more on the different use cases for Papermark. There's, of course, on the startup side, it's sending pitch decks to fundraise for a seed round, a Series A round, maybe going into data rooms for a deeper due diligence when you're raising a larger round and already
Hmm.
have some traction. So you would use that probably for a Series A, Series B, Series C type of round. Venture capital funds typically use Papermark to fundraise for their own fund vintage, whether
Hmm.
that's emerging managers raising their first fund or established managers going for their fourth fund and up.
Hmm.
They also share LP reports, quarterly reports, memos among their own teams, but also to their
Hmm.
investors,
Hmm.
and then
Hmm.
portfolio updates, of course.
Hmm.
For investment banks and M&A firms, it's the most obvious use case is using the data rooms for a buy side or a sell side deal. So whether you're acquiring a company or selling a company, either side would typically set up a data room with all the documentation, all the financials, all the information about that transaction, and then share it with either a bidder or a direct investment partner. And
Hmm.
then you have sales teams that share proposals to prospective investors. They share pricing
Yeah.
documentation. And for them, it's of course important to have that engagement
Hmm.
tracking. They see exactly when a prospective buyer opens a document, how long they spend time on that particular proposal, whether they stay longer on the pricing page or on like a particular offer or product, and that gives them real insight. And
Hmm.
for real estate teams, um, we are heavily used in the real estate industry as well, because here you have often like land sales, property transactions.
Yeah.
They're similar to M&A deals, just in their own domain. They have a few different workflows that we can cater to perfectly, both with the page by page analytics, the custom domains, because real estate is all about trust, and also with NDA workflows
Yeah.
and dynamic watermarking, which is used probably the most on the
Hmm.
features.
Thank you. a lot of your customers must be migrating from various other platforms.
Mm.
What would you say is the number one reason teams switch to Papermark?
Yeah, so we like I mentioned, Papermark is not the first data room
Yeah.
and document sharing platform to do this securely. We are doing a little things differently when it comes to analytics. We give you much more insight. We give you much more branding and personalization. And then on the other side, our business model is very different from a lot of the incumbents that have huge enterprise sales teams that go out and sell over periods of time to like
Hmm.
large enterprises. So their price adjusts up a lot. And that's just not feasible for a lot of the whether it's a smaller company, a smaller transaction, um, people that are new to the industry and want to use a data room, they can't pay that much. They can't pay tens of thousands of dollars for a data room. So Papermark is definitely on the price side. We've just created a business model innovation in that aspect,
Hmm.
where we are able to offer a much superior product at a lower price. Um, so that competes a lot. And then second, we're offering a lot more flexibility, whether it's on the custom domain side, on the analytics side, but also because we're open source. So if you need something specific, you can either request a feature from us and our open source, either we build it in the open source space or you can build it on top of Papermark. So we make Papermark extensible. And a lot of the incumbents, they're of course proprietary software,
Hmm.
and try getting a new feature from them. It will be very hard
Hmm.
because they
Yeah,
haven't really done any innovation in the last 10 years.
correct,
So
correct.
that's definitely a lot of the pain points. So price, flexibility, better analytics, better product experience, open source is
Hmm.
definitely the huge factors for changing.
Hmm. And since you spoke of open source, my next logical question is what has been the biggest technical or community challenge in running an open source product at scale?
Yeah, open source is a very interesting approach. I think it fits really well for our industry because
Hmm.
security is on the utmost importance for document sharing and data rooms. And open source, there's nothing more secure than being open source
Hmm.
because you literally open up the source code. You can share and build trust with your customers
Hmm.
that nothing nefarious is going on. You
Yeah.
see exactly how the documents are processed, how the analytics is collected. You fully open up. Also, it's independently auditable
Hmm.
by either third parties or by our customers. So we have nothing to hide behind, and that's
Hmm.
amazing.
Very
Of
interesting.
course, managing a community in the open source space, especially around contributions, everyone gets really excited.
Hmm.
And but with every open source project, there is a learning curve.
Hmm.
There is history, how a certain feature got developed, or what the roadmap is. So sharing that transparently, not just with our customers, but also contributors, helps a lot. We have contributors from Korea, Germany, the United States,
Hmm.
India. It's really all over the place.
Right.
And finding kind of like the time to manage these contributions, reviewing them, that has generally been a kind of like a blocker.
Hmm.
But now we're using much more support from whether it's AI workflows on the actual contributions that do a first pass and reviewing, and that helps a lot with getting pull requests merged and these contributions part of our open source project.
Very interesting. Mark, how does AI integration enhance workflow or decision making for users?
Yeah, I think AI is going to be a huge part. It started already in the last year for Papermark,
Hmm.
but the 2026 roadmap will be all about AI agents, giving the flexibility to our customers and their visitors and external partners
Mm-hmm.
viewing data rooms and individual documents,
Mm.
about customizing how they want to interact with the data room,
Right.
whether it is by viewing the documents like they used to for the past 20 years, or whether they want to ask questions in natural language to a data room of
Mm.
maybe 1,000 documents and getting the exact right answer with a reference to the page of a particular document or a couple of
Mm.
documents
Mm.
where information is coming from. So this retrieval of that AI gives you, spanning kind of the unlimited computation power and knowledge graph, is something that really unlocks due diligence workflows in a new way.
Very interesting.
Um, and at the same time, of course, um, having different agents with different prompts or different settings. You could have one AI that is maybe specialized in due diligence. You had one AI that's specialized in accounting. You
Mm.
have one AI that's specialized in data forensics or in a technical AI. And all of these have different degrees of how they look at documents
Yeah.
and then judge and return information like that to you.
Mm.
So we're very
Yeah.
excited for
Yeah.
what's to come in
Absolutely.
this year.
Absolutely. I have time for two more questions for you. How do you envision the future of secure document sharing, and what role do you foresee Playmark playing in this?
Yeah. Um, I think it's going to be very exciting. In the end, I want that document sharing just becomes like this invisible infrastructure. It's
Mm.
just how you do things,
Yeah.
similar to what Stripe did for payments.
Mm-hmm.
You want not just to say, oh, I'm going to use a data room platform or data room software now. You want to just share documents either in bulk or individually, and you expect the analytics, the access control, and security to
Mm.
be there by default.
Hmm.
And I think that's really why open source is also so important, because we have experiments running and we can
Yeah.
see a future where you don't even need to sign up to a platform. You run it locally on your system where you
Mm.
have all the documents already, and you just share it and connect to an interface like Papermark, and then share the documents that way to a third party to do a due diligence, run an M&A process.
Mm.
And that's where Papermark kind of goes more in the background, and in the end, your documents shine while still retaining analytics, control, and security, of course.
Mm. Fascinating. And my last question to you, Mark, and this is a general question. What advice would you give to founders who are building open source alternatives
Hmm.
in crowded markets?
Yeah. Um, so if you'd asked me that question maybe 3 years ago, I'd probably say um, do something great with like open source, find a market where kind of like the current incumbents are complacent. They're not really innovating. They might be overpriced for what they actually offer. Um, our competitors, of course, are exactly in that space, right? They've existed since the early 2000s.
Mm.
Some of them have come in the 2010s, but they haven't really changed or innovated anything in the last 10 years.
Mm.
And being open source, offering that alternative, and at the same time with a modern twist and just being 10 times better, really opened up kind of the floodgates for us.
Mm.
I think in 2026, if I were to start a company again, I would still go with the open source route. I would focus much more on kind of like agentic workflows. What are current workflows that customers are doing?
Mm.
And what would be like an AI equivalent? What if the customer is not reviewing the documents? What if the customer has an AI that works on their behalf
Mm.
and is going out and doing a due diligence? How would the AI interact with your product?
Mm.
And how does the human interact today? And how
Yeah.
would the AI interact with it tomorrow? And
Mm.
finding that those nuances I think this gives you a lot of insights, and you would be the first to market because none of the incumbents would switch their product today. We're lucky that we're a small, nimble team. We're open source. We have a lot of great innovation from our contributors and our customers. We still have the opportunity to switch and add on, but a lot of our incumbents, they don't have that ability because they either sold to a bigger company, they have a huge amount of like enterprise customers already that expect this like old workflow, but they're slowly switching over. Those customers are switching over to agentic workflow. So I'd be focusing on that.
Very interesting. And on that note, Mark, I just want to say what a fascinating conversation this has been, talking to you about Papermark. Document sharing, data rooms have existed for a long, long time to come. And as you said so rightly, not too much innovation seems to be happening there, but Papermark clearly is beginning to make a difference. And I'm hoping to use it myself, spread the word around for you, because in something as critical as document sharing, and you talked about PDF, it has its own pain points as well. But if you're coming up with new solutions for something as simple and yet so difficult and so necessary in our lives, it's bound to be a big success. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.